Hello and welcome to Microsoft Ignite 2024 Unpacked. I'm Rob Strechay, Managing Director, and I'm joined by Bob Laliberte, who's a Principal Analyst with theCUBE Research. And we're going to break down what happened at the keynote this week, some of the things that Satya said, some of the things that others said on the stage, and really kind of dig into where Microsoft is at in this AI journey, the cloud journey, what they're doing with 365 and co-pilots, and really unpack some of the stuff that maybe didn't hit your radar out of that as well. But one thing I want to start with is, where is Microsoft? So we partner up with ETR, Enterprise Tech Research, to really understand what's going on. And Ken, if you could bring up slide number 1 there, here's the net score of Microsoft over the last 2 years. What you can see is that blue line, which is really kind of the difference between the greens and the reds, which we call, or ETR calls, net score, really helps you understand how much momentum they have. It's not absolute dollar spend, but it gives you an idea of what's going on. What I find very interesting about this is it's very secular. It's very secular on October in particular being kind of a trough for them. What has been interesting is they were much more consistent over the course of last year, and the dip is not as deep this year from a spending momentum. What we also do see is they have still strong growth up in those green and people adopting. So I think, again, as we pull back and say, you know, where are they going with this, it really is interesting that this should be, and we expect them to kind of take off and gain momentum out of Ignite. Might be one of the reasons they moved Ignite to later in the year, actually into October and November, to really go and help build into Q1. So with that, let me also bring back in slide 2 here from ETR, where we're going to take a look at across all of the different segments that we're going to talk about. What I find interesting here, and I've marked it out in red, and this is a year-over-year and quarter-over-quarter comparison, I really highlighted the places that are down year-over-year from a momentum perspective. Again, this is that net score, you know, against net scores from the last quarter and the last year. It's not too shocking that they're down quarter over quarter, because as we saw before, you know, October tends to be a little bit of a drop off. But when you look at cloud computing momentum being down, you know, a little bit, 1%, and you start to look at other things like Azure cloud computing being down 1%, a few more percentage points actually, that to me was actually telling. So functions was down 1%, cloud computing down about, you know, 5 to 6%, and then you start to look infrastructure software. This is a lot of the IaaS software and other things. Also encompasses HCI, their hyper-converged Azure Stack stuff, and then you start to look across all of the other pieces. It kind of is really interesting in what they are talking about in the keynote and what Satya really focused on. So with that, let me bring Bob into the conversation, because I've been rattling on for a little bit here. So no, it's great, because I think, again, you know, we both looked at this keynote and you had some interesting thoughts. What were kind of the top thoughts that came to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the first and foremost is that the AI train keeps rolling, right? This has been a topic of conversation since all the shows in the spring and really for the last year. So it's clear that the focus for a lot of organizations, for a lot of these technology vendors, is how do we keep driving and evolving the AI story? I was a little surprised that he said we're in the middle innings of AI. I guess if you look at that from a perspective of AI in general, where you've had Watson out for, you know, over a decade and things like that, you could make an argument that we're in the middle, you know, early middle innings maybe of the AI story. And if you go back even further than a decade, right, people have been working on AI for a long time. But from a generative AI perspective, we're certainly in the very first inning.
Totally agree with you on that. I think, again, and you had some other thoughts that you were looking at as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I found some of the things, obviously I cover networking and observability and so forth. So I'll start with the networking piece, and that was around the hollow core fiber announcement. Now, this is not something that they just announced. They've been talking about it for a while. There's been articles published back in June and so forth on it. But it does present a major improvement and enhancement to the networking space. And it's great to see, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal today talking about the importance of networking and elevating the role of the quote unquote plumbing. But the hollow core fiber essentially enables organizations to carry more capacity over greater distances with a lower latency. So sort of a no-brainer, right? It just seems like, yeah, this is a technology that everyone is going to be implementing. Obviously, there's probably a lot of high-frequency traders already using it and having it deployed. They're not talking about it, but they're probably using this type of technology. And so Microsoft is saying, hey, this is a great application for it in those back-end AI data centers, and not only within the data center, but across data centers and being able to stretch that out.
Yeah, I think, again, to me, it was really interesting how, there was a lot of talk about AI, almost too much, if you ask me. But I think one of the things that ties into that was the AI foundries and where they're really looking at AI big room. And, that Toyota built, and they had some discussions about NASA using Copilot with all of the data that they have and being able to bring that out. I thought the examples were very agentic oriented, not about really fine-tuning or really bringing your data together, other than when they started to talk about Azure Fabric. The big announcement there was bringing Microsoft SQL Server to Azure Fabric. I thought that was interesting, but expected, and I think actually, if you talk to people they're like, well, Fabric really is SQL Server, so it's just a different way to deliver it. So I think a lot of fun topics around that. I thought what was a little bit of what he talked about with Fabric was that they're really focused on open data formats as well. This ties into what we've been seeing with Iceberg and Parquet and other pieces. He mentioned Databricks once in the whole thing. I thought that was interesting. But if you think of Ali and what he said, the CEO of Databricks, he said, I'll really compete at that compute layer. But you saw some other stuff really like down the quantum path and things of that nature as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, AI is super exciting, but quantum continues to evolve as well. And that's something we really need to keep an eye on, because as that evolves and matures and becomes commercially available, there's going to be huge advances. The ability of quantum computing to solve some of the world's most difficult challenges it's really impressive. And so what we saw here was their relationship with, I believe it was Atom, and being able to sustain, I think it was 24 reliable qubits and so forth with far less errors. And I think it was the first time they were able to do corrections and things like that in a commercial neutral Atom environment and commercially available environment. So some really cool stuff happening there. So this is not to be lost in the shuffle of AI, that there are some other cool technologies going on, and how these organizations are able to drive quantum to more commercial availability. Now, still talk about early innings, right? Still got a ways to go before that's really going to take hold, but it's great to see them promoting it and talking about it and investing dollars into it.
Yeah. I agree. I thought the quantum stuff was a good call out. I thought that was really forward leaning and about how they were making it real. I think it also ties back to some of the things that we didn't hear about. There was not a lot about Azure Stack HCI. There was not a lot about observability. I know we both covered different perspectives of it. I know we're going to have a lot of both people talking about this, a lot of the partner ISVs on today that are going to really dive deep into these topics. So I don't want to, spill the tea a little bit on that, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the key here is that with the observability, as the environments, all the research that I've been doing talks about how organizations are really concerned that the environment is getting so much more complex because it's far more distributed. There's a lot more data that has to be managed. So having the ability to have visibility into this highly distributed environment, whether you're on premises, whether you're in the public cloud or multiple public clouds, at edge environments, and getting granular into what's going on with the data flows and so forth, is really going to be important for organizations in order to one, drive greater operational efficiencies, but also optimize performance, which is going to be critical for a lot of these AI environments as well.
Yeah, and I think we can't ignore security. There was a big message of security. Microsoft gets beaten around the head. You know, Charlie Bell left AWS, went over there to run kind of the security aspects of things. I think, you know, again, they've been getting better. I think there was a huge, you know, footprint that had to be secured. I thought that some of the security they didn't get into was really the AI model security specifically. I know we're going to have some people on from like Varonis later today to kind of go down that path, but I think also the guardrails and governance around AI was kind of missing. They talk about the factory, they talked about a number of different things and how you can get your data in, but really didn't get into the messaging around that either.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I think with everything that's happening so fast, security is going to be incredibly important for these environments. And you know, also the fact that it's, you know, the use of AI by the malicious actors to create more sophisticated threats and so forth. So they have to be counteracted. Right, the white hats need to be able to leverage this technology, and they really need to make significant investments in it so that they can ensure that any of these models, any of the AI that they deploy is going to be properly secured.
Yeah, well, I think, Bob, with that, let's not spill the tea too much on our great guests today. I think, you know, again, let's really focus in, and we'll be back later to kind of wrap this all up. But I think one of the things that's fun is when you can bring the ecosystem together to really unpack this as well, and we're going to be doing that all day long. Stay tuned to Microsoft Ignite 2024 Unpacked. Bob and I will be breaking it down with some of the ISVs that are out there making really great announcements. So stay tuned, and we'll be back in a little bit.